Sometimes I think we'll never live up to that great opening that you created for this podcast, but today we might just live up to it. Uh,
I hope
um,
so.
you know, s- Sometimes when you're in this business, you end up meeting or working with hundreds, sometimes thousands of people over the course of a career. It's very rare that I have the opportunity to connect with someone fairly early in my career that 20, 25, 30, even 35 years later, you're still working with. And, uh, and that person turns out not to be just a terrific artist or writer, but an amazingly great person as well. So it is a wonderful combination to have. And that's the combination we have today with author Andy Mangels, that I think is one of the true greats in the comic book business. Uh, let's bring in Andy.
Alrighty.
Hey,
There we go.
how are y'all?
Hi, very nice to meet you, Andy. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. David mentioned we've known each other for goodness. It's almost been 3.5 decades, almost 4 decades, which is a long time when we're so young. You know,
Right?
I mean, look at him. He has a full head of hair. I have a full beard. We're so young.
Between
Combined, we'd have a great combo.
Right.
between the two of you, yeah. I noticed when you sent your artwork that it said Innovation. I'm like, oh, he worked with David back at Innovation, so you guys have known each other for a while.
It's like, oh my God, what was it? Early 1990, late 1990, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andy, you'll remember better than I how we first connected.
I actually don't remember how we first connected. That's the weird thing. I was
Oh wow, oh wow.
Uh,
Okay, so
I think, I
go,
think it
go
was
ahead.
through Amazing Heroes. I was writing previews for Amazing Heroes magazine. They would do a preview special every 6 months of like what's coming out in the next 6 months, and I think it was through that. I was really impressed at the time with, Innovation published some really great stuff. Hero Alliance was one of my favorite comics back then, and
If it had been that way for about 20,000 others, we might still be doing it.
right, right.
Uh, uh,
Uh, and Interview with a Vampire was a game changer for the industry. And I think it was right about the time you were doing Interview with a Vampire that I got connected with you somehow.
yeah, and that kind of makes sense. When we were working on the Vampire Lestat, and I had, which was the first one we did, and I had announced that after seeing, I think it was DC's Black Orchid that was fully painted, I wanted to try comics that way. And Interview with Vampire Lestat, I had announced as a 32 pages, no ads, slick paper, cardstock, deluxe bi-monthly thing. So it was going to be a 300-page adaptation of a 300-page novel. And the editors at Marvel, that I knew at the time, all basically told me that I was an idiot for doing it because the market would not support it. And yeah, the superhero fanboys didn't, but the editors weren't cognizant of a market outside that. And what little market research we were able to do told us that many of those comics sold to females and to a gay readership that uh, Marvel didn't even recognize.
Nobody did at that time.
Yeah,
It was a very bleak atmosphere in comics at the time for anything that was not solely driven specifically to heterosexual male readers, which is a huge portion of the market, absolutely. But there was a whole untapped market that was not being serviced in the comic world.
yeah. Just as there is now, which is why we're seeing so many things doing well on Kickstarter. But we were just building out at the time from doing creator-owned stuff and things like Hero Alliance that the company owned to doing the licenses. And we had just started rolling out with the Anne Rice, and maybe we had announced Lost in Space or something of the sort. And then Andy comes along and says, "All right, let me help with all that."
Right.
And so Andy coordinated what Child's Play first, and then Nightmare on Elm Street. You want to talk about that process?
Yeah, I was writing regularly for Amazing Heroes, a column called Backstage, and it was kind of the leading industry column in fan press about the confluence of comics and Hollywood and how they were just starting to meet up. And this is in the early days before the Batman movie had debuted, and Dick Tracy, and some of the ways in which Hollywood was just starting to kind of take comics seriously. And in the process of doing that, I had actually dealt a lot with the people who were in Hollywood who understood that comics were a market that was interesting, but they didn't know how to use comics. And so I started saying, well, you should be licensing your comics as they used to do back in the 70s with, Gold Key and Western and some of the early publishers where, and even DC and Marvel, where they would license certain titles. But I was like, there are so many properties that could be licensed to comics. Why don't you do that? And so on one side, I was working Hollywood to license more of their material to comics. And on the other side, I was going to publishers and saying, hey, let me offer you the ability to interface with Hollywood and to do some licensed comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I had actually worked I had been intended to work on some Nightmare on Elm Street stuff for Marvel when they did a black and white magazine. And that failed spectacularly because Marvel had no idea what Freddy Krueger was when they published the magazine, and there was this huge backlash against it. And
I honestly wasn't aware of that. I just knew it had some really good Joe Jusko art on the cover.
Yeah. No, I mean it was a really nice looking magazine. It was just it blew up in their faces, and certain retailers, certain very powerful retailers, like Buddy Saunders, from Lone Star Comics, was like heavily against Marvel doing a book about a killer. Do books about non-killers like Magneto or Doctor Doom or somebody like that. They don't. They only kill countries. They
or
don't.
the Punisher. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't kill actual people. But so Marvel canceled their Nightmare on Elm Street book like just so quickly, and killed it in its cradle, so to speak. And then Blackthorn picked up the license, and I wrote an adaptation of, I think it was the fourth or fifth movie for Blackthorn. And yes, Mike, Marvel screwed up. I wrote an adaptation for Blackthorn of the fourth or fifth Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and then they imploded and lost the license. And that was about the time I had started interfacing with Dave, and I said, hey, could we, could I bring you some licenses? Could I work with you on some of these things? And we did do Child's Play. Child's Play, the first thing we worked on was Child's Play 2, which, by the way, that's Derek Robertson's his first professional work. The guy who co-created The Boys. The Child's Play 2 was his first professional work. He had self-published a book called Space Beaver, and that's me on the cover too, by the way, of issue 1. back when we were like, if Chucky's going to get revived, it was in the movie. It was like two nameless assistants, but if you put up the splash page to issue 1 of Child's Play 2,
I don't know where that is.
it's under Child's Play. But
Right
there's
here.
there's a
Hold on.
splash. There's a splash page that has Derek Robertson and I as the 2 technicians that bring Chucky back to life. And so we did Child's Play. That was licensed through Universal. And it was at a time when Child's Play 2, the movie, it was the first sequel to the Chucky movies. And we did that. We did then we launched from that into a series called Child's Play the Series, and then from that in Child's Play 3. So we did a year's worth of Child's Play stories through Universal. There we are. There's Derek and I reviving Chucky in the background.
Very cool.
And there were things that Dave allowed me to do on Child's Play the Series that were pretty cool and fairly revolutionary. Not only was he it wasn't just that I had gotten you the license. You then hired me to write the series, which I was forever grateful for, because it was some of the first comic work that I wrote that saw print. I had written stuff for DC that didn't see print, paid for, didn't see print. I had written stuff for Marvel, paid for, didn't see print. Blackthorn, paid for, didn't see print. Dark Horse, paid for, didn't see print.
That's not a good process there. Yeah.
No. And I was just I was pretty much. I was probably one of the most famous fan writers that was not being seen. Dave, do you have any idea why I wasn't being seen? Do you remember?
I honestly do not. But what I remember was you came to me with these projects. They came together the way you told me they would. You said as part of it, you would like to write these projects, and you would help me with some others.
Yeah.
And I was not only grateful, I was impressed with what you were coming up with stories. Now, it was easy to handle the adaptations, relatively speaking, because the story's already there, and that becomes more of a matter of craft, which, of course, you had plenty of, and so you did the work exactly as you said you would. It was professional work. I was happy to work with you and keep coming back. So I had no clue why nobody else was going to you, but I was certainly glad that you were doing so much work for us.
Well, there was a reason that I wasn't getting a lot of work, and Dave remained. At the time, you weren't blissfully unaware, but you blissfully didn't care. And that was, I was the first openly gay person in the mainstream comic book world. And I had written a big article for Amazing Heroes magazine that ran in 2 issues in 1988. And it was called Out of the Closet and Into the Comics. And it was about how the comic industry dealt with queer characters and queer creators. And at that point, nobody in mainstream comics would come out of the closet, and I did.
And in our case, I've got to say this. I was aware of it, but none of it changed the quality of the writing. So why would any of that matter? I also don't care whether or not you like your steak medium rare or well done. I'd probably look askance at you if you wanted it well done, because I've never come across a steak that's well done that's been done well. But other than choices like that, what the hell does it matter?
Yeah.
It might make you better informed to write certain kinds of stories when those opportunities arose, and I hired you for one of those. But the it didn't matter otherwise. You were an excellent professional and great to work with. Nothing else matters.
Yeah, yeah. And I always appreciated that. It was refreshing that somebody actually cared about the professionality of my work, not just what I was like as a person. But comics has there's been an element to comics that and this is something that prospective comic people, especially in today's social media age, really need to pay attention to now more than even back then. Was there is an element of when editors meet you at conventions, or when editors are interacting with you, or fans are interacting with you, they do pay attention to what you're like as a person. Back then, they were paying too much attention to the fact that I was gay and not enough attention to my qualities as a writer. Whereas Dave was just the opposite. He didn't care that I was gay per se, but he cared about what I was like as a writer. And what helped his company was I was also really good at interfacing with Hollywood. And that that led to the second license I got for you, which was Quantum Leap. That was also a Universal property, and that was with Child's Play. And I remember saying to you, Dave, when we got that, I said, I don't want to write the Quantum Leap series, but I do want to write one issue of the Quantum Leap series down the road.
Yeah.
And that that ended up being something pretty major.
Yeah. Do you want to go to that one?
Yeah, there were. And so that was Quantum Leap 9. With that fantastic, it was, what was his name on the cover? Was it Taylor?
Winston Taylor.
Yeah, Winston Taylor. Really fantastic cover. I remember Scott Bakula loved the comic because the covers were so fantastic.
I probably told you the story, but maybe the listeners here didn't. I had met Scott Bakula very briefly at a Quantum Leap convention many years ago when we were publishing this, and it was just a "Hey, how are you?" handshake, and then he was off. Decades later, I was in the convention in either Portland or Seattle, whatever Emerald City is.
Seattle.
Yeah, and I was there and got a chance to spend some time with him. Mike Diodato and I were both there. Went up with 2 sets of the Quantum Leap comic, one that we had signed to give him, and one that we hoped he would sign for us. And we came up, and he accepted the comics very graciously, and he signed ours. And then he's flipping through, and he holds up your comic and says, "Oh my God, I loved this so much." And he proceeded to tell us the plot of the issue without opening the comic.
Wow.
So the cover was such a strong image for him, and your story was so friggin' good that I don't know if he had recently reread these or what the situation was, but that story stuck in his mind 3 decades after publication.
Wow.
Good work, Andy.
Thank you. Well, that was a pretty important book. When I said I wanted to write a Quantum Leap story, there was one story I wanted to tell, and it was solely to be a part of the Quantum Leap universe meant that you had to put right what once went wrong. That was the motto of the show. The entire reason of the show was to put right what once went wrong. And Quantum Leap had this horrible episode in which a lesbian murdered her female lover with a high-heeled shoe. And in the episode, Sam sends her to jail. And that's how the episode ends. The evil lesbian who killed her lover with a high-heeled shoe, which spoiler alert, most lesbians didn't wear. But he sends the evil lesbian to jail, and that's it. And it was an awful, awful story. And fans and the press and everybody was just like, boy, they really whiffed the ball on this one. It was so bad. And it was the first and only time they had done LGBTQ stuff on Quantum Leap. And I said, I want to put right what once went wrong. And I want to cue the dogs.
Sorry about that.
And I went to Universal and I proposed this story, and I said, if you want to go to the second image from this, there you are. The story's called Up Against a Stonewall. And for those who are not familiar with what Stonewall is, in the summer of 1969, at the Stonewall Inn in New York, the gay community, specifically, it was a lot of young street kids, drag queens, some transgender activists, and so forth at the Stonewall Inn, had finally gotten fed up with the police coming and raiding them every other night and arresting them, taking to jail, and doing their best to ruin their lives. And so they rioted against the police, and that lasted for several nights. And it became the flashpoint for an entire world for queer people to stand up and to say, we're not going to take it anymore. That became known as the Stonewall Riots, and it's still celebrated every year at Gay Pride. That's what the Gay Pride date is all about. And so Stonewall is the emblem of when the community said, we're not going to take this anymore. We're going to stand up for ourselves. And so for me, with Quantum Leap being a book that had time travel elements and so forth, I said, I want to do something set at the Stonewall riots. And what better way to put right what once went wrong than to have Sam leap into the body of the woman he sent to prison on the day she gets out, which just happens to be a few weeks before the Stonewall riots. And so that's what we ended up doing with this story. And I wrote a story that had elements of, there was an African-American transgender model that if you look at the pages where I did that, and then you look at Ryan Murphy's TV series Pose, which, was a huge award winner over the last 3 years, there are scenes from the comic that are very closely mirrored in the TV series Pose. Whether you saw the comic or not, I don't know. But I can tell you that it was a very effective. The art was stunningly effective, and what the artist did, I put in real people who had been at the Stonewall riots, and celebrities from the time. Andy Warhol was in there. There's even a reference to Dean Stockwell, who was actually palling around with Andy Warhol at the time back then in 1969, and was of course Al on Quantum Leap. So there's even actually a reference to Al meeting Al, and so I had some fun with that. But beyond the story, which I'll talk about the artist in a moment, beyond the story, they also let me write an editorial, and this was the summer. It was coming out in the summer of I think it was 93. Don't go to my books yet.
So, somewhere we had that editorial page.
Oh, okay.
Let me bring it up.
The editorial was one in which I actually excoriated Universal Studios for having done the TV episode, and talked about writing this story and why it was important to do so. And that was during, there you are, putting right what once went wrong. And that was during the summer when it was the National March on Washington, Washington, D.C., and millions of people went to Washington, D.C. to protest at the Capitol and to march the Washington Mall. And so I talked about that aspect in the editorial. And then we ended up doing a book signing for the comic at the National March on Washington for this Quantum Leap comic. It's probably become one of the most famous and most iconic LGBTQ oriented comics of all time. I put it out every year during Gay Pride. Dave, you just posted a link to it yesterday, I think. It's something that Universal has no problem with it being put out for free. I put it out for free. Dave puts it out for free. The artist puts it out for free because we want that story to continue to be told. We're still really, really proud of that story. And the fact that Universal let it be published was to their credit. But not only that, they let it be published with an editorial that criticized them and said, you needed to fix this, and here we are fixing it. That was unheard of. No, in the history of comics and licensing, that had never been done before.
To Universal's great credit, I forget first if it was you or Universal who had sent me a copy of a list of all the things the TV show was not allowed to do in their leaps. And Universal licensing allowed us to break all those rules. So they were very generous to us in trying to get the best possible stories out there.
Yep. Now, I wanted to bring up the artist on this because Dave mentioned him a bit ago. Young guy, really, really, really young guy, working with his dad. And if you look at the credits in the book, if you go back to the
let's see.
If you go back to the splash page.
Yeah, there we go.
There you are. So you'll see that it says Mike Deodato Sr. That is not the Mike Deodato that most of us know as Mike Deodato. That's his father.
Well, here's the truth behind that story. That is Mike Deodato Jr. with very little of senior there, because when the guy from Brazil I was working with to bring all these artists in, Helcio de Carvalho, he tried to tell me that, okay, this is Mike Deodato's father. You're already using Junior on A Beauty and the Beast. The father can do this. Well, the father didn't have the time or the interest to do all that, and the son was actually fast enough.
Right.
So he let his father take all the credit, but it was the son doing, I'd say, 99% of the work. And
I think, if I remember right, due to the publishing end of things, I think this ended up being his first published work. I know it was super early on in his career, but I believe because of the way the dates on it, which everything was published, I think that this was actually his debut. It's credited to his father, but this is actually Mike Deodato's work.
Yep. And he was terrific even back then.
Yeah. And it was kind of amazing to be a part of things with innovation back then, because it was the early days of what would become Glasshouse Graphics. Dave was discovering all these artists that were around the world whose work was, mind-blowingly good and excellent in particular in likenesses. And it was something that a lot of the companies, Marvel and DC, especially, who were doing books that should have had likenesses, the likenesses were not often very good. And whereas Dave, and when he was working with painted artists particularly, was really pushing them to do excellent likeness work. And
like we were getting on Dark Shadows and
Yep,
and
yep.
some of the other things.
One of the fans, I noticed that, there it is, Sean, had said, and that question had come up earlier, how hard was it like to get licensed at the time? And I'll tell you that once I was able to show licensing companies some of the books that Innovation was doing, specifically the Lestat books, and then once we had done some Child's Play and some Quantum Leap, and all we had to do was send them a couple of those, and they were like, oh, yeah, okay, we can see it. We know exactly what the book will look like. The question is it going to be a painted comic or is it going to be a traditional line art comic? But it made negotiating with the companies so much easier. And at that point in time, Hollywood wasn't looking at it as a cash cow. They weren't saying, we want to do a Child's Play comic to make money. They were saying, we want to do a Child's Play comic to promote the movies. And so they looked at it as a promotional tool, and they were a bit less financially driven than they are now. Now it's like, okay, we need a $200,000 upfront fee, and this percentage of the licensing, and this, all that.
And you have to take out $1 million policy for publishing to make this happen, which is just insane to me.
That didn't exist back then, and it was a very different world, and really Innovation and the work that I did with them in licensing and the work they did on their own in licensing, that changed the game. It was Innovation and Dark Horse. Dark Horse was doing the stuff with 20th Century Fox, with Aliens, and then Predator, and then Innovation with Child's Play, Quantum Leap, Nightmare on Elm Street, Lost in Space, the Lestat books, changed the game forever for licensing in comics. And
we only put right what once went wrong, because Dell and all those others had been doing licensed comics from doing Disney comics. There's a license,
Yeah.
So I remember from the 90s that there were a series of licensed properties that were done in comics, and you were talking about how the likenesses weren't that great.
Yeah.
So, and they were doing the likenesses good enough, but they were just really static, boring, like almost talking heads.
But what happens there, you get a lot of artists that the only way they can do a likeness is if they're sitting there tracing or copying a photo. Mm-hmm. So you end up with a lot of generic publicity shots, or at best, they had a VHS tape at the time and were freeze framing the shot to get something they could use. So it took a better artist who could do more dramatic storytelling and then create a working likeness that was wonderful. Right. For me, maybe the best example of that was there was a Star Trek graphic novel by Chris Claremont and Adam Hughes. Mm-hmm. Oh my God!
Code of Honor.
Yeah, and I thought that was such a beautiful book. And he did a lot of favors to William Shatner in that one. made the man look really good. But I thought that was splendid work. It's like, all right, if there was the time and money to do it, all the licensed books should be so good.
Right. I will say that one of the we did a couple of these Universal books, and the next license that we went to was Nightmare on Elm Street, and that was through New Line Studios.
Where do we have that guy?
That's in the first folder.
Yeah, pull that up, Chris.
That should be.
If you go to Nightmares on Elm Street #1, that'll be now you're in books.
Go somewhere else.
You're getting previews. Anyhow, Yeah, let me keep talking while you're looking for that. But Nightmare on Elm Street was one that, you know, I had obviously been involved with two different versions of that license through two different companies, but I hadn't been the one that negotiated that license. And so when we negotiated it, one of the things we knew they were going to make further Freddy Krueger movies. That was just a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
And so I negotiated as a part of the license something that had never been done before, which was I said, I want the comic to be listed on the movie poster when you do your next movie. I want the comic on the movie poster. And they were like, okay, yeah, no one's ever asked for that before. Let's go ahead and do it. Universal wouldn't do that. I don't remember if I didn't think to ask or whether they wouldn't do it, but New Line Cinema, what? New
Sorry
Line
about that.
New Line Cinema did say yes to it, and so if you look at the Freddy's Dead movie poster, um, at the bottom of that they actually say read the Innovation Comics series. But we did with Nightmare on Elm Street. We did that a little backwards because there wasn't a movie on the stands at the time, or in the theaters at the time. So we started with a series spinning off from the movies, and it was not called Nightmares on Elm Street. And we ended up doing 6 issues of that was set between the movies, and then that led into the movie Freddy's Dead. What was really cool about that is, if you could
Trying
go,
to find the image you were talking about, and it's uh, Chris. There's one where it's literally the movie poster.
yeah. So what I did in the first 6 issues, which included issue 1 was the first art ever by Tony Harris, the guy who later became very famous for doing Starman. That was his comic debut, was in Nightmares on Elm Street #1. And I would do stories that were set between the movies that kind of continued on where did those characters go to. There was that cover, by the way, by Jason Palmer. Heather Langenkamp freaking loves that cover. When she does conventions, she often has that up at her booth. She said, I have never looked more beautiful than I do on that cover. and while I don't agree, I think she is a beautiful actress. I do agree that cover by Jason Palmer is phenomenal. And Innovation was going to be putting out a poster of that cover. It never got released, but I sure wish it had, because boy, is that a spectacular cover. And that was very early on in Jason Palmer's work. And now you see him at Comic-Con, and he's got 3 booths, and he's huge. He does all this stuff for Lucasfilm and Paramount, and but he got his start there at Innovation. Anyhow, so with the comics, we would do stories that were set between the movies, and I would bring back characters that were in the movies. And the idea was, I don't know if you can find, I hate to say try and find it, but try and find the interior pages from issue 6. It's Nightmares on Elm Street 6.
Got them. Hold them.
And so I had brought back Nancy, Heather Langenkamp's character, and she was going to be the protector of good dreams, in the same way that Freddy was a demonic figure of nightmares. That was a great double-page splash by Patrick Rollo. But the ones in issue 6 following brought back Heather Langenkamp's character as the protector of the good dreams. And then we took the Dream Warriors, who were the most popular characters from the 3rd and 4th movies, and I put them in as kind of the X-Men of the nightmare / dream world. We were like, okay, Freddy killed them, but because of there's Heather Langenkamp's Protector of Good Dreams, and then the next page shows the Dream Warriors. And the idea was we were going to do a Dream Warriors series. I don't know if you remember that, Dave, but that was part of the contract.
I didn't remember it as part of the contract, but it has been so many.
Yeah. We were
30 some years.
We were going to have our own X-Men like series called Dream Warriors. There they are. You can see it's characters from. There's the puppet guy, the D&D magician kid, the punk girl, and the Kincaid character, who in the dream world he can change into a Black Panther. So they were going to be kind of like the X-Men of the dream world. And that was going to get its own series while we continued on, because we didn't know what they were doing with the movies yet. So while we were doing this, they started working on Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. And it was going to be the last Freddy Krueger movie. And they took actually some cues from what I was doing in the comics, and did some flashback sequences and some references to previous movies. And one of the biggest cues, if you can put up the cover to issue 6, it's a white cover, mostly white cover.
I don't know what happened. You sent these things in order, but they don't seem to be that way up on the files here, and I don't know why. I expected to just be able to click through. Were the files too large to upload as is, or what happened?
Didn't put all the files up. That's the problem.
That
could explain it.
You're the one.
There you go. Okay, so you see there, Freddy's slicing his way through a map. And you see it as springwood is dripping down from his hand. We needed to pick a map for this, a real map for the cover. And I said, it's Springwood, Ohio. That's where Freddy is based out of, is Springwood, Ohio. And they were like, well, how do you know that? And I says, well, if you look at the license plate in this movie, and you look at the street sign over here, and you look at the police car, I was like able to sit there and pick out all these details that said, this says it's Ohio. And they're like, but there's palm trees. And I says, that's not the problem of Ohio. That's the problem of the movie, the first movie's continuity, and the fact that it was low budget. They didn't cut the palm trees out. Anyhow, so they took the idea that it was Springwood, Ohio from that cover, and then that made it into Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. They made it Springwood, Ohio.
That's fantastic. I'm a huge Freddy fan, so I appreciate that level of detail.
And we ended up, I got flown down to the set of Freddy's Dead. Chris, if you can pull up, there's an editorial page from one of the Freddy's Dead. I think it's number 3, that I want to talk about here in a minute. But I got flown down to the set. I did a whole photo shoot with Robert Englund. We used that for PR purposes. And then when the movie actually came out, they flew me down to Los Angeles for the publicity funeral of Freddy Krueger at Hollywood Memorial Cemetery, where I think Marilyn Monroe is interred. And that's what got Innovation on national news. We were on E! Entertainment Television. We were on NBC. And it was all, me holding up the comic and talking about, Freddy's dead, but he lives on in the Innovation comics. But they had, this is how New Line treated us as licensees. They had me, the comic book writer, give the eulogy at Freddy Krueger's funeral. I got to read messages from Alice Cooper, and I preceded the director of the movie in talking about Freddy Krueger's history and so forth. They really treated it as if we were important people. And that was something that for licensed comics just wasn't done.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
I wanted to point out. So the reason I had you pull up this one, this was one of the photos that we did here for the press photos that we did of Robert Englund and I. And when we did the photos, he didn't have his teeth in, so he didn't smile in any of the shots or grit his teeth like he didn't do that look. He just looked serious in all the pictures, like angry but serious. Dave, do you remember why this photo was such a? Do you remember all the mess over that photo?
No, I don't. Fill us in.
Okay, so you will once I start telling this story.
Okay. Hey, I'm old. I forget things.
Yeah. So, because this made it onto a couple of documentaries. It's on the Nightmare Never Ends documentary and so forth. Everybody loves this story. When we did this photo shoot, this is in 1991, and back then, piercings on adults other than ears were almost unheard of. Like, it was not a common thing to see any other body part pierced. And I had this idea that, like, Freddie had ripped my shirt open with his claws and so forth. So I brought a shirt that was pre-ripped, and we did shots of him and me in a leather jacket and various other shots. And then I took my shirt off to change into the ripped shirt. And the crew members, there was this collective, all these big burly electricians and crew members and everything who were standing around while we were doing the photo shoot. There was this collective gasp and like, oh my God, oh, what is that? Oh! And it was because I have a pierced nipple. And in 1991, that was not very well known, and everyone's like freaking out over it. Robert Englund, to his credit, was just kind of like, But anyway, so I put this ripped shirt on. We did this photo shoot. We chose the photos that were going to go. Each issue had a different photo. And this was going to go in the final issue of Freddy's Dead. And I remember I don't remember who brought it up first, but there was concern over whether or not in a Freddy Krueger comic about killing teenagers, they could show a photo of my nipple ring.
After Nightmare on Elm Street 2 came out?
Yes. So yeah, people just kind of didn't remember. Wait a minute, Nightmare on Elm Street 2 had a lot worse than that. But it was kind of a callback, in fact, to Nightmare on Elm Street 2. What ended up happening was, first it had to go through the licensee, and the first question was, will New Line Cinema allow it? So New Line Cinema, the innovation went to New Line Cinema, and they said, yeah, we'll allow it. They had a meeting about my nipple ring at New Line Cinema, whether or not they would allow it.
Who knew you would be such a talk of the city?
Then it went back to Innovation, and Innovation had to decide whether they were going to allow it. And at that time, David, you had like a board of directors or something?
Oh, God. It was, they wouldn't weigh in on the big stuff, but the little shit they'd annoy us about.
Yeah. And so then it was, it had to go to the board of directors of Innovation, and they had a meeting about whether or not they would allow my nipple ring to be seen in an Innovation comic book. So there's a meeting at the movie studio. The director had been talked to, and Innovation's board of directors had a meeting about whether or not they would allow my nipple ring to be seen in a comic book.
The stuff people think of as important.
All of this in a comic about a guy who kills teenagers.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, it finally saw print there in issue 3, and you can see the size of it. It's a very small black and white picture. And it isn't until I actually point out that there's a nipple ring that you probably would even notice that there is one. Anyhow.
Yeah.
That's the story, the nipple ring that brought down Hollywood.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you having Kincaid like turn into a Black Panther,
Yeah.
like was that purposely a little on the nose?
It was there. Yes. Yeah. It was.
Okay,
It was. It was purposeful. And it wasn't specifically about Marvel. It was a reference to the Black Panthers.
that's what I
Um,
meant. Is that yeah?
yeah,
That's what I meant.
yeah. And my dad had known Eldridge Cleaver back when in the 1960s. My dad was at West Point. I don't remember how he interfaced with Eldridge Cleaver, but he had known him. So I had known about the Black, even in Polson and Big Fork, Montana, little tiny towns in Montana. I didn't meet a Black person till I was 11, but I knew who the Black Panthers were from very, very young. I knew what the struggle was about. We didn't have Black people in that area of Montana, so I didn't meet anybody, but I knew about that struggle. So putting a reference to the Black Panthers in there, that was something I wanted to kind of do. So
Okay. Fantastic.
so we did the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and then we did an adaptation of Freddy's Dead, and that was the first time. I think that was the first time you did a 3D comic, wasn't it, Dave?
Yes. No. It was second time because I had done a book that was called Soul Quest that I had published, but before that, it was a 3D called Black Shard 3D,
Ah,
and so we were able to go to what was his name? Ray Zone was the name
yeah,
he used.
yeah.
Uh, that did the 3D separations for us for the last chapter of Freddy's Dead. Uh,
So there was a difference, though, in that it was the first color one, wasn't it?
it's possible.
Because I remember,
Possibly even likely.
I remember that we had a lot of like, how do we do this in color? And even for movies, it was something, having that element of the film in 3D was something that they had to like calibrate with film theaters, because film theaters hadn't done 3D movies since the early 1970s. I think it was like Jaws 3D was like the
Yeah.
last major 3D movie, and so it had been almost 15 years since a movie theater had shown a 3D. The 3D cover is in that file, by the way, Chris. It had been probably 15 years since a movie theater had shown a 3D movie, so they even had to calibrate it for that. But I remember in the comics, we had to like figure out, all the 3D comics that Ray Zone was doing were all black and white or blue and red. And so we had to figure out, how do we do this in a color comic? And so we ended up doing a issue 3 as a normal comic, and then issue 3 as a 3D comic halfway through it.
Yep.
And that was a really trippy experience.
Nobody had ever done that, so I was glad to be the first who managed it. I can tell you that the local theater didn't give a crap when they did Freddy's Dead in 3D, because you've got to have basically a projector with a bulb twice as bright to be able to do the
Right.
3D properly. And they didn't care. They just did it. It's like, okay, why is this part so dark? Oh, it's a horror movie. Yeah.
So we did Freddy's
Did
Dead.
you find the 3D cover?
I'm looking for it. Is
Okay.
it?
He's actually putting on the glasses, if I recall.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. So that wasn't that one. All right.
cool graphics. No, that's the other issue 3. The As we were doing this, and as we were preparing for Freddy's Dead, we were kind of like in talks as to what's going to come next. And the idea was we were going to go into Dream Warriors as its own series, and Patrick Rollo was going to be the artist on that one. And then we were going to do Nightmare on Elm Street: The Beginning, and that was originally going to be a 4-issue miniseries. that was telling the origin story of Freddy Krueger, because they had said this is the final. There it is. Freddy Vision, it'll blow your mind. With like the spurting blood to either side. It was very, very classy. Um, the what we ended up doing with the beginning was, it was supposed to be Freddy's origin story, because they didn't know where they were going to go with the movies. Like, was Freddy's Dead going to really be the final movie, or would there be more? And so, in order to continue telling stories, we couldn't tell new stories necessarily with Freddy. So we says, let's go back and let's do an origin story.
Mm-hmm.
Let's tee it up for, if they do decide to do more, it'll be teed up for what comes next. And so we were doing a 4-issue miniseries, and then I got word, no, we're cutting it back to 3 issues. And then, as it turned out, only 2 issues were ever published. And Dave, you want to talk about what happened there?
Do you remember if the 3rd issue was drawn?
It was penciled. Yeah, the Day brothers had penciled it.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, Innovation was in a strange situation. The money people that had put together this, Century Equities was the team you were talking about, led by a guy named Danny Adderholt.
Oh
And
God, yeah.
yeah, their point of view was quite a bit different than mine. They either wanted Innovation to be a huge, huge hit or to fail terribly. That were their 2 options. Because if it were a huge, huge hit, then they'd make money. If it were failing terribly, they could use it as a tax write off. So what happened was we hit that middle ground. We were making money. We were profitable. We were in 4th place. There was Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, then Innovation. That's a pretty good place to be when your company published its first books in '89, and by '91 you're in 4th place. All right, well, apparently they disagreed. So they started taking steps to dismantle Innovation. They wouldn't let us take on new licenses. They just obliterated any marketing budget we had, with the logic being, well, if a book is selling, you don't need to market it. If a book isn't selling, it's a dog anyway, so why waste money? And I said, tell that to Coca-Cola. Yeah, but that argument apparently had held no water for them. So they systematically started taking apart the company. Got rid of Diana Okamoto, who was my top person there, and just I could see the handwriting on the wall. So I went in March of no, I'm sorry, end of February of '93 with a non-negotiable list of 10 demands, and they wouldn't agree to any of them. So I put in my 2 weeks notice, left, started Innovation. And I'm sorry, started Glass House Graphics, and then Innovation limped along till the end of the year. They told me nothing of what was going on, and so your book was unfinished. There's a finished 12th issue somewhere of Anne Rice's Queen of the Damned. There's I think there's an unfinished issue of several of the other books, including Lucifer's Hammer, and I know there's an unpublished Quantum Leap, and that one is, most of it is sitting in my desk drawer back there. Um, so it's a horrible thing what they did, because the company was making money. And people to this day said, oh, Innovation, another of the failed companies from the '90s. It's like, no, we were making money. The company was profitable. And It's only when they started pulling that shit that the company came apart. So, you know, after that, I started running Glass House and representing the artists from Brazil, and it expanded into what it's doing. And that gave me the opportunity when it arose to come back to you to keep working with you.
Yeah, yeah. Now, we did skip over in the process of all this the one other big license that I got for you, and then but
All right.
let me finish the story of Nightmare at the beginning, because
All right.
that was your end of it. On my end of it, um, once Dave was gone, Dave was the one that was excited to work with me, excited to hear my ideas, excited to 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 partner with me as an editor, as a publisher. Once he was gone, everything just slogged and slowed down. To it wasn't that the people there didn't like me; it was that they weren't excited to. Like, there was so much going on at the company that was falling apart. They had no room left, and as Dave said, they had put a freeze on getting new licenses. Beyond that, there had been one big license that Dave had asked me to get. And this was a license that hadn't been had in comics since the 1960s, and everybody wanted it. And in 1991, the a new NBC was doing a new version of it, and that was Dark Shadows. And I remember Dave and I talked about licenses all the time, and we went after some really interesting stuff. Hill Street Blues, we went after. We went after Saturday Night Live. We went after, God, I'm trying to remember what. There was just this wide variety of licenses. If it seemed like it could work as a comic, we thought like Saturday Night Live could work like a Mad type comic.
Mm-hmm.
Hill Street Blues was serialized, and it was one of the most popular shows on TV. So we thought maybe that could work. We didn't want to do. I remember we had discussions about, do we do Jason? The Friday the 13th movies. Do we do? And we were like, we already do Chucky and Freddy. Like, we shouldn't do Jason also. And Eclipse had all the Clyde Barker stuff, so that put out Hellraiser. You already did Psycho,
Mm-hmm.
which that was another Universal property. I don't think I negotiated that one, but you negotiated it through the contacts that I put in place.
Exactly right. We got into Universal and New Line Cinema thanks to you.
Yeah. So Dave said in one of our discussions, he says, the book that I would most love to get of all time would be Dark Shadows. And I was like, whoa. I says, that is tough. I said, everybody wants it. Marvel wanted it, DC wanted it, Dark Horse wanted it, First Comics wanted it, Kamiko wanted it, everybody wanted it. And there was a new company called Claypool, and Claypool desperately wanted it. And I said, let me try, let me see what I can do. So I went, I did my magic, and there was at one point, it wasn't a bidding war, it was a talent war, where they were like, well, let's see what you can do with it. And they had people do samples or submissions or something like that. Marvel did it, Claypool did it, Dark Horse did it. I'm trying to remember who else. There was 4 companies and Innovation in the running for Dark Shadows. And I had played really, by that point I was on my licensing game. I was really good with it, and everything that I had licensed had been a hit. So I was really sharp with it. Dave turned in, I think it was some painted samples by the guy who Silas.
Yeah, Silas Smith. Yeah.
Who ended up doing Dark Shadows. And then there was one day where I called up Dave and I said, guess what? I got you the license. And he was so happy. And I remember he was like, well, as you've done with some of the other licenses, like some of the licenses I got, I didn't write for, but some of them I did. He says, do you want to do something with Dark Shadows? And I says, eventually down the road, I'd like to do something. And he says, well, we're going to do 4-issue miniseries. And I says, well, put me down for the 4th one. That should be enough time. You will have established the license and so forth. And I says, I love werewolves. This is a new take on Dark Shadows. They haven't introduced Quentin the werewolf into the series yet. I want to do werewolves, and I want to introduce a gay werewolf in the process. Not Quentin, but I want there to be a gay werewolf because I wanted a gay werewolf. So I says, put me down for the 4th set of stories.
And we did the first set was Scott Rockwell and I co-wrote.
Yep.
The second set, we had Maggie Thompson of the Comics Buyer's Guide.
That was her first comic work.
Yeah, and she seemed to enjoy doing that very much. And then the third one, see, I had remembered it differently. I had remembered that you were going to do the third one.
I thought we had discussed it, but then you ended up doing. It may have been when you left or something that it got switched.
Yeah, Scott ended up doing. Scott Rockwell ended up writing. I think they did 1 issue of the third one, and that's as far as it went. And Scott wrote it solo. And if you weren't doing the third one, I forget who was doing it because it wasn't going to be me. But I remember writing a partial outline for somebody, and I don't know if that ever got developed into anything. But I was so happy with this project because every page was a painting that looked like this cover.
Yep.
And E. Silas Smith did the whole first series. The second one was Jose Pimentel with Hector Gomez on the covers. And
all of these, you're still working with all these guys on Glass House, aren't you?
I did for many years. Silas Smith passed a few years ago. I think he was 83 when he passed. And Hector Gomez is still around.
Yeah.
He occasionally does work. Joe Pimentel, I don't know, he's out there, but he's kind of vanished except for occasional pieces up on his Facebook. But this I thought was one of the best books that we had published. Just visually, everything came together from the painting to the paper to the production. And to this day, if somebody says, "Well, what was your innovation stuff like?" I'll show them this, and I'll show them Piers Anthony's On a Pale Horse, the first volume.
Yeah. There was another cool. I just remember this licensing wise. My mind is blanking on his name, but the guy who brought you masks.
Mort Castle.
Mort Castle, yeah, he brought you masks, which got you the first color Stephen King story that had ever been done in comics.
Yeah, that was Popsy.
Yeah, and that was pretty. It's still one of these things that even today, hardcore Stephen King fans aren't even aware that it appeared because it was so. They couldn't use Stephen King's name in any bigger font size than anybody else's.
It had to be. I think it had to be alphabetical, and you couldn't promote him above anybody else.
Yeah.
But you can use my story, and you can have it for $400.
Yeah, which is a bargain.
Yeah.
But that all once I started doing the licensing stuff with them, and they had success with that, it was so much easier for Innovation to start getting all these other licenses that they did, literary licenses and movie and TV licenses and so forth. Now the one thing, and I don't know if Dave remembers this, and this is in no way his fault. The one thing about Dark Shadows that ended up being a negative was not only that I didn't not get to write it, but as part of my deal with it, I said, because it was a big deal to get this light, to get it away from Marvel and Dark Horse was a huge thing. And so Dave says, "What do you want for your work?" And I said, "I want, I think it was 2%. I want a 2% royalty on it."
And that made perfect sense to me, and that was part of the budget that I turned into.
Yep.
Oh God, I'm forgetting the name of the Vince. What was
Yeah.
the guy who was in charge of the accounting?
Yep.
And so
And it was a that way, if the book was a success, I would make some money, and I would make some money as long as they published it. If it wasn't a success, well, then I had done a lot of work and I wouldn't make much money. But either way, it seemed reasonable. Once Dave was so they ended up, because of accounting issues, they ended up not paying me anything until they would have paid me after Dave left, except Dave was no longer there to protect me. And so what ended up happening, when Innovation closed up shop, they owed me $20,000 in royalties. $20,000.
because it was a pretty good selling book.
It was, it was a lot. And I remember, Dave, it wasn't you that sent me. Was it you that sent me the comics, or was it George? The all the back issues of my comics.
I honestly do not recall. If you're talking the person who physically shipped them, that was a lady downstairs whose name escapes me.
Well, what ended up happening was, like, right towards the end, when the writing was on the wall, when everything was starting to collapse, it became really clear I was not going to get that $20,000.
Then that would have been George, because he stayed there after I left.
Yeah, and so he was like, "I'm going to do what I can for you, but it's dire here. It's like we're hemorrhaging." And this had gone from, this fantastic company that was number 4 to hemorrhaging within the space of, months.
It took a special kind of effort on the part of the Century Equities people to dismantle things that quickly.
You would almost think that, like, it was the later owners of Marvel or something like that. the way they destroyed Innovation, you would think that maybe they went on to buy Marvel. But
do you remember me telling you that they had brought in Jim Shooter to discuss taking over running Innovation?
Yeah.
And he took me to lunch afterwards and said, "Dave, they're doing you no favors here. The small percentage of the company that you own, they were going to figure out a way to take from you and give it to me, and they were going to kick you out. You've been doing a wonderful job here, but you need to find something else."
Yeah.
And a few months later, that was one of many things that inspired me to finally put in my resignation.
Yeah. It was a sad situation. So right at the end there, George said, "I'm going to do what I can for you." And then one day I lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment building that had a big porch out front with stairs going up to the porch. And I get this beep, 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 beep on my doorbell. And I'm like, "Okay, who's like jamming my doorbell?" I'm like, "Hello." And the UPS driver says, "You need to get down here. I am not carrying all this stuff up to your porch." And I was like, what's going on? I go down there, and there was 40 cases of comic books that George had apparently, like, on the last day that they still had a UPS account, had just thrown all my books, slapped labels on them, thrown every book I had ever written, had slapped a label on it, shipped it to me. And he shipped me all the back issues that Innovation had of everything I had ever written, which was 40 boxes of comics. And it wasn't $20,000. I'm still, but I still at conventions, that's still what I sell.
I am so glad he did that. So, you know,
Yeah,
obviously George wasn't in control of the purse strings, but I'm the fact that he was able to do that, that was good.
I was really impressed with that. Now, Dave, you went on to do Glasshouse Graphics, and over the years, you know, Dave and I had a great relationship there. When he left, we kept up that relationship as we could. We'd see each other at conventions, and I always felt like Dave was one of the best editors and publishers I had ever not just worked with, but met in comics. Every time he said he would do something, he did it, if it was within his power. And he never treated me in a way that felt disrespectful. He always was professional. It was a great thing, and I was just like, it's too bad we can't work together. You represent artists. And then Dave,
Yeah,
Dave called.
yeah. Every so often, rarely do we get requests for writers, which is a sad thing because I have several folks that I want to turn regular work into. But in the rare instance that that opportunity arises, I go to the guys that I can trust. And Andy is going to turn in great work on schedule. I have a few others who are the same, but quite a few times uh, it's not always worked out that the jobs have come through, but nearly every time a job that is right for him, I will reach out to Andy and say, "Hey, do you have time to do this?" Because if you want a good book, you go to Andy. Right?
I appreciate that, and I know Dave's got a stable of people that he's worked with over the years, and whenever he does call me on something, I appreciate the fact that he thought of me for it as opposed to one of his other people. But I also know that he needs to give work to other people too. So, I'm never jealous for the most part. But I will tell you, there was one job that I did, and I found out that they had chosen my proposal for it over another person who was way, way more famous than me. And I did a little Snoopy dance that day because I was like, yay, I beat X person. Just because it felt so good. I mean, this is a person who I think they've won like major industry awards, and I was like, yay. But I've done stuff for you, Dave. I've done comic proposals. I've done some ghostwriting. I've done some editing stuff. I've done
Yeah.
graphic novels. If you put up Fractured Fairy Tales, that was a series I did for Dave. With Dave, you wrote
No,
that?
no.
No, not that.
There's 6 graphic novels that are the same style of cover.
Yeah, Fractured Fairy Tales, and Dave did some books for them it was Greek heroes or something.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, you did the fairy tales. I did the Greek mythology. I did these. Yeah. Journey of Jason, Agony of Atlas. That's my Stan Lee thing. Pride of Perseus, The Might of the Minotaur, my personal favorite. Acclaim of Achilles, Price of Pandora. So yours were with the same publisher.
Yeah. So that was Graphic Planet or Abdo Books, and they're a kids publisher. That this was an interesting thing for me because I had never I'd never had a book done before that was produced so well that was sold to such a small audience. So the series was called Fractured Fairy Tales, and their concept was to take old fairy tales, public domain fairy tales, and modernize them into something that would appeal to young teen and preteen readers today, that were specifically very modern and now. So you can see there's, do you want to just scroll through them? Beauty and the Barista was about a guy who had a scar on his face and was always grumpy for some reason, and Beauty had to figure out why. Cinderella lost her iPhone at the high school prom, and the guy had to find whose iPhone it was instead of the slipper. The Little Mermaid song was a girl who, her family was pressuring her to be a swim champion, but she really wanted to try out for American Idol. Rapunzel Swings was about a girl whose long hair kept her gymnastics, dreams on hold. What else was there? Snow White and the Seven Dogs. This is one of my favorite. Those are actually several of my dogs that we got to put into the story, but it was about Snow White, who's a dog walker, and then she meets a blind boy and his dog, and they end up saving her life at one point. But this was my favorite book just because it was so personal. It was like 5 of my dogs through the years, and then the other 2 were editors' dogs. And I was working as a caregiver for a blind client at the time, so this one was a very personal one. And then I think there was one more. I don't know if you'll get that. It was the video game one.
Yeah, let's see if I have that one.
But anyhow, so we did these Fractured Fairy Tales, and what made their audience so small was that Abdo targets libraries. Their books are sold to libraries, and only libraries. So they are available at school libraries and at public libraries, but they never sold these to any comic stores. You can buy them on Amazon. They're kind of expensive, but they're worth it. They're full graphic novels, full color, great paper, great everything about them is a normal graphic novel. They're hardcover, but they're designed specifically for a library audience. And I had never encountered that in all my years of publishing. Had a publisher say, "No, we aren't going to sell this to these other 5 audiences. We're only going to market it to this audience." So
it seems a wasted opportunity. I would love at least to see your Fractured Fairy Tales and my Greek mythology all collected into an omnibus that has with all 6 and distributed to traditional bookstores. And so.
Yeah. It is, however, the only project that I've done outside of Star Trek that has been translated into multiple languages and done as audiobooks. And I was kind of surprised when they were like, "Yeah, there's an audiobook of your graphic novel." So that was fun. I got to work on those for Dave and Glasshouse Graphics. That was just a couple of years ago. Recently, if you put up Planet Zolo, I'm not sure where this is at the moment, but they had said we could announce it and everything last year.
Okay.
So I had done I did a new video game graphic novel series for a company called Planet Zolo.
Got that one, Chris?
Let's see here. Is that a?
It's in the second folder, and it would be called Planet Zolo.
It's not there. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, maybe you'll find it. If not, you can find online. You can find copies of the online game are up. on their webpage, and we were going to do like 16 graphic novels. Right now, the first one's completed, and then we're just waiting to find out what's going to happen with future ones. But that was a lot of fun because I got to do a lot of world building with them on something that I wasn't super familiar with, the video game creation process.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a different kind of world building when you're doing video game stuff and comics in connection with each other, because we had to be consistently aware of, is this character going to be a playing character? Is it going to be a story character? Um, what, when we make this decision here, how does that affect, you know, what the story play is going to be? It was a really interesting learning process to work on those. Um, and
I don't have that
okay,
unfortunately. That was not
okay.
in folders.
Um, the process of working through and with Dave at Innovation and with Glasshouse Graphics, really, if Dave hadn't utilized me at Innovation, I don't know where my career would have gone. I really don't. I thank and I blame Dave for my career. You know, because he was really, there were certain editors, Kim Yale was one at DC, Marco Palmieri, Michael Urey, certain editors who literally defied editorial mandate not to hire me because I was gay at Marvel and DC and at Dark Horse. There was Planet Zolo.
I have it here somewhere. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, so that's page 2 and 3, I think, from Planet Zolo, and it looks very much like what the video game looks like. If you watch the trailer for the video game, you'll actually see this sequence in there. Anyhow, back to the praising Dave. It was something that in the industry, the amount of homophobia I faced was so immense, and it took these people. It's like Kim Yale was like, I can only get you a couple fill-ins on Star Trek, and Michael Urey was like, I can only get you a couple Who's Who. This is all I can give you. Let me give you this much, but I'm being blocked from giving you anything more than that. I can sneak this in. And that was what people were having to do. They were having to sneak hire me because I was gay.
See, that makes zero sense to me. How
That's
if
a
you
shame.
can do the work, that's what counts.
Yeah, yeah. And Dave was throughout my entire career. Dave is the one constant that has been there, that has been so clear-headed about that concept. About it just didn't matter what your private life was if you were a good creator. And it's one of these things that he's been there for so long in my career that that it's been great. I do want to jump to, with that, if you can pull up like some of my books and things like that, because what happened from Innovation and with all that licensed work that I did, I started getting work. I got work with Topps next on Jason Goes to Hell, which was so now I had written Chucky, Freddy, and Jason.
Fantastic.
And I was supposed to be doing some Hellraiser stuff at Marvel, Epic, before that line got cut. But so I did that, and that led me to writing Star Wars, and my first book, which was Star Wars: The Essential Guide to Characters, and that in turn led to me writing Boba Fett: Twin Engines of Destruction, which is a very was voted as the best by 20,000 Star Wars fans. They did a poll of Star Wars comic fans, and that was voted as the best Star Wars comic ever published. but it's called Boba Fett: Twin Engines of Destruction. I know you're trying to find it, Chris.
It's there. I think we're fighting each other.
Yeah,
there we go.
Characters. That was my first book, and it was a bestseller. Went all around the world. Started a whole line of books for them, essential guidebooks, and then I did Boba Fett: Twin Engines of Destruction, which then that in turn was repurposed. Parts of it were used as the base plot for The Mandalorian.
Very cool.
The TV series The Mandalorian has a very clear through line to the Boba Fett comic that I did. And then I wrote Star Trek stuff for Marvel, for DC, for Wildstorm, and co-wrote 15 Star Trek books for Del Rey. I don't know if you've got those covers queued up that you can do.
Talk a bit about that. What was your process for getting those, and were they just the straightforward novels with
Star Trek Titan, that's book one, Titan Taking Wing. That was one of the later books that I did. Next Generation, Section 31 Rogue, which is a big image of Picard's face, if you're looking at the
Yep.
That's the second Titan book that I did. The Section 31 Rogue was actually the first book that we got. When I was writing some stuff for Marvel's news magazine, and this was another situation where the editor was like, I can maybe give you, I can give you this. I can give you stuff to write in the news magazine. They aren't controlling that. But, I can maybe give you a Star Trek fill-in. And at that point in time, even though I had written some Star Trek stuff for DC that was never published, paid for but never published, I was still kind of like, I don't know Star Trek as well as I know all these other things. So I brought in a co-writer who really, really knew Star Trek like the back of his hand. And I knew he wanted to become a writer, a professional writer. So I brought him in as a co-writer, and we ended up writing a Star Trek fill-in comic for Marvel. And Paramount loved it so much that they said, we want these guys to continue to write the Deep Space Nine series. So go ahead and excuse the other writers on this series. We want these guys to continue. And so we wrote that until Marvel lost the Star Trek license, and then we got the Star Trek books. Did you get the Section 31 book? Did you find
I just had it. I don't know what happened to
it.
Come on, you can do it. We have faith.
So we ended up writing the first Star Trek book we did was called Section 31 Rogue. And it was a Next Generation book. And all we were told by the editor was it needs to be about Section 31, which was the Black Ops of Starfleet. And it was a Next Generation book. So we had pretty much free reign to come up with whatever plot we wanted to pitch. And I had remembered watching the movie Star Trek Generations, and Neil McDonough played a character on there called Lieutenant Hawk, who was on the bridge. And there had been a couple of rumors about him while they were filming the movie. One was that a major cast member was going to die in the movie, and they were going to replace them. And the other was that there might finally be a gay character in Star Trek, and it might be introduced in this movie. So I remember watching in the theater with that in my head, and Neil McDonough.
I can't load it because it's a TIFF. That's why.
I can fix that. Go ahead, keep talking.
Okay, so Neil McDonough comes on screen, and everybody's talking to him, and everybody's interacting with him like he's been on the bridge forever. This is the first time we've seen the character, but it's like he's been on the bridge forever. And then in the movie, he's the one that ends up dying by the end. And after that, it came out that he was supposed to, rumored, be the gay character, and that they had decided not to kill off the main character, so they killed off him instead. And so I said, okay, there's a story, there's an in-universe story there. Why did everybody on the bridge treat him like he was somebody important? And because the character's already dead, but because there was a rumor that they might have been a gay character, why can't we do that? Well, the reason we couldn't do it was because, and I'm very public about this, Rick Berman, the producer of the Star Trek franchise, was very anti-gay, and that was why there was no gay characters in Star Trek, was because of him. And
except for Sulu, that's out now.
That's out now. That's after this book.
Yes.
So there had been minor, like a paragraph in this book in which somebody was talked about, or a minor character here. There was a character in some ebooks, and there was kind of a non-gendered character that Peter David was doing, and so there'd been some like attempts at like tiny little things, but there hadn't really been anything major. So that was when we went to them and said, we want to do this gay character. They were like, okay, we can do it, but we have to be really careful about it because we're going to have to keep it from the producer. We're going to have to hide from the producer that this book is about a gay character.
Yes, hide gay people from the guy in charge of the series about infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
Right. So we ended up writing this book, and most of the book is a flashback. It starts out after the Generations movie with Hawk dead, and then it flashes back. We meet his lover. We find out how and why everybody on Enterprise treats him the way that they do, what his whole story's about. It's all Section 31. There's all this intrigue, backstabbing, dark black ops stuff. It's a really cool story. And then at the end, it goes back to the present day when his lover is mourning him at his loss in the movie, and then his lover continues on. And his name was Ranul Karu, and he actually appeared, I believe, in like 34 more novels. He was very popular. He was a big gay bear. For those people who don't know what bears are, they're big, kind of burly, bearded guys. And so this guy,
you have absolutely no understanding or knowledge of that.
Yeah, not me. It wasn't me. It was not a Mary Sue character. It was based on a friend of mine who's like 6'3" and bald and had a big mustache, and that's who I based the character on. And
I want to say something here.
Yeah.
You've talked a lot about the introducing gay characters or gay storylines in a number of the books that you've written, but that is not why editors have shut you out because they were sure you were going to write about gays or sneak gay characters in. That was just their own personal problem with the concept of that reality, because you have written plenty of stories from these fractured fairy tales on that have not been about gay characters. They're just good stories.
Thank you. And that is absolutely right. I'm highlighting some of those things because they're like, to me, it's important elements of my career. But absolutely, the follow-up book that we did to this was a religious story, and I had a priest once tell me that my discussion of faith in it made him cry because it was so beautiful that I had coalesced the concept of faith and belief in higher powers and so forth into a section of the book that was so religious that it made him cry. And that was a priest,
Yeah.
So I didn't have a problem writing any of this stuff. But when I did want to write something gay, and I was presented with these stone walls, that's when I bucked against it. And next Section 31 was a great example of that. The story isn't about gay; it just happens to have gay protagonists, and that was the potential problem. The Paramount took the manuscript when it was done, and they put it on the bottom of a pile of stuff that the producer had to read. And I believe they put it there like the week the book was at the printer. So technically they were providing it to him in time, and if he had read through it in a timely manner, he would have been able to stop it. But by the time he got to it and said no, it was already printed and shipping to stores.
Yeah.
And that broke things for Star Trek, where suddenly they couldn't ignore LGBTQ characters, and it broadened things out to where now we have characters on television now. But it really, this was the dam breaking. And then I wrote 14 other Star Trek books of various stuff, including Captain Sulu. Got to write Captain Sulu. All this stuff, as I say, it all kind of like I credit it back to Dave because he believed in me and he let me excel at what I was good at. And what I was good at was the confluence of Hollywood and comics. That was really where that's my sweet spot.
Well, that sweet spot has brought you into doing a lot of writing for other things. Talk a little bit about Retrofan and about those supermarket magazine / books that you've been doing.
Yeah, so Retrofan is from Tomorrow's, and I've been writing for them for over a decade now. It's kind of my career started writing for fan magazines and writing a lot about Hollywood and comics, and I'm still doing it now. 40 years later, I'm still writing. Every issue of Retrofan, I write about that Hulk story on the cover, and you can actually see. Oh, you've cut it off on screen here, but at the bottom of the screen, under "Have Gun Will Travel," my name is there. They actually feature my name every issue because I'm now considered a bonus for people to buy an issue. It's like this issue has something by Andy Mangels in it. I'm now famous for writing things about Hollywood, and it's led to career of doing stuff in Hollywood. I've done about 40 different documentaries. I've done this Iron Man book. Then I did get to do, if you want to put up Little Mermaid now, that's what's called a bookazine, which is the modern book publishers had to find a way to accomplish some of the things they wanted to do in a field that no longer buys books, but as much, but does buy magazines. And grocery stores don't have shelf space for books anymore, but they do have shelf space for magazines. So there's several publishers putting out what are called bookazines, which are books done as magazine sized. And so the Little Mermaid one here is one of the ones I did. I did an Iron Man one. I did an Ant-Man one. I did an Aquaman one that never saw print, and a Black Panther one that never saw print. And I'm hoping to do some more in the future. But these are the type of books, they're usually 100 pages. They're square bound. You buy them at the grocery store newsstand. And, so the publishers started hiring me to write these because, again, it was right at that sweet spot of where Hollywood meets comics. And I could do this type of stuff. I was really proud with the Little Mermaid thing here that I finally got to tell the actual story of whether or not the infamous VHS cover with are those penis castle turrets or not, and was it on purpose, and was it, that whole story is finally covered in this magazine after
Great.
35 years. I get to reveal whether or not those are penises in the turrets of little
Andy, we are now at the point where this is officially our longest podcast ever.
Oh, okay.
We need to wrap this up. Do you have any final comments, thoughts for the readers of what you've got upcoming in the stores? Any upcoming DVD projects?
So I have just finished. I just finished doing, as Dave knows, 500 Days of Song, where I was like, I don't have enough to do. I think I need to do 500 days in a row where I sing a song live online. Because, like who needs an extra 3 hours of sleep a night? I'll instead spend 3 hours a day, prepping and singing a song online for 500 days, which Guinness World Records then said, no, we don't give world records for personal achievements. We only do it if you're competing against somebody. And so until somebody tries to hit 500 days of song, I can't get the world record. So somebody out there, please try and hit 500 days and fail, because you will. You aren't as insane as I am. Then I can get the world record. But
how many days do I have to do?
Enough that Guinness will say, oh, you were actually competing against me.
You're allowed to stop at 498.
Right. So I am working on right now, in addition to when publishers come to me with a project, and there's a bunch of publishers who are in talks with me about various things. I have no immediate comic book projects coming out. The last big project I did was Wonder Woman meets the Bionic Woman, and as you can probably tell from my background, I'm a big Wonder Woman fan. But I'm going to be self-publishing some stuff, a book on the history of Wonder Woman on television. I'm doing a book on the stage plays of Stephen King. Having done 40 documentaries for DVD, I'm always in the market to work with documentary companies. But in the meantime, I'm also getting hired by a lot of documentary companies, including AMC. I just shot something down in San Diego for a new series that's going to be on about comic fandom. I just did my first voiceover work for a film called Surge of Power, where there's smoke, and I voice a little robot companion to one of the superheroes. So my career is still kind of coalescing around comics, Hollywood, their intersection, and I'm still whenever David calls me, like even today, it was like, hey, do you want to do this podcast? And I always say to Dave, yes. I don't think I've ever told you no, because I know that whatever you and I produce together is going to be fantastic. You're going to find the coolest artists. It's going to be well done, and best of all, you're going to respect me, and for the most part, leave me alone. You let me do my work.
Well, yeah, you don't get the best person for the job and then screw up how they're doing that job. It's only
micromanage.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Before we had, whoops, sorry about that. Got excited. Before we end, talk a little bit about you being a character on Grimm.
Oh, yeah. I didn't send you any photos of that. So Grimm was filmed in Portland, Oregon. And whenever they film something in Portland, I always audition for it. But I have a very specific look. It's not easy for Hollywood to picture me as anything other than a Viking, a biker, a prisoner, a Viking biker prisoner, a prisoner Viking biker. So it's like some combination of the above. That's all I can be, with the exception of Leverage, which used me in 3 different episodes, 2 of which were directed by Jonathan Frakes,
Fantastic.
Project Next Generation, who actually knew me from having written the Titan books featuring Riker. But Grimm, I ended up doing. I saw the first episode at Comic-Con, months before they ever aired it, and I tried to get on as a worker on the show, like a PA or something like that. And I didn't get that, but I am in episode 2, the second episode they shot, and they actually gave my character like a name badge, and I was the janitor at the police station. And there's this secret thing that I did because I thought, okay, they told me they might be bringing my character back. The part of the show set at the police station. There's going to be a janitor from now and then and so forth. But I knew that the conceit of the show was that everybody was secretly a monster, or not everybody, but that the world had secret monsters in it, that they were living amongst us, and the Grimm guy could see them, but nobody else could. But he couldn't always see them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a pair of dental fangs, uppers and lowers, werewolf fangs, that were molded for my teeth for fun. And so I wore those on set when I was on Grimm. And nobody questioned why the janitor had werewolf fangs, because everybody thought someone had told me to do it. like makeup thought, oh, well, that must be something props told him to do, and props thought makeup had done it, and the director thought, like everybody thought there was a reason that there was a werewolf at the police station. And there was a reason, because I wanted to be the werewolf at the police station. I knew what the show was about. I wanted it to be like, I'm building this.
You got the memo. Yeah.
So then they never ended up using the janitor again. But the next time they used me, I think it was in the 3rd season was the next time. I'm a biker at a bar, wore my werewolf fangs again. By now, with my look, everybody knew me. 4th season, come on, and I'm something else. Wear my werewolf fangs again. Finally, by the 5th season, they brought me in for a 2-part episode, and they were like, okay, now we're really going to use you big. And so they made me a secret werewolf that was part of this kind of Proud Boys Aryan Nation group of monsters. So we got to film. I filmed for 2 episodes. The second episode, let's say I made some good decisions. I complimented the assistant director on something in a way that really this is something Dave used to do too, which was the highlighted things that were good about my work and made me feel valued. And so I did that to the assistant director. I had noticed he was writing the extras' names down, and he would call people by name. And it was something that I'd never seen done on a film or television set before. Everybody always treated extras like they were movable furniture. Mm-hmm. You over there. I want you to do this. You do that. He was like, Andy, I want you to do this. Bob, I want you to do this. Sally, can you go over there? And so I went up to him at dinner break and I complimented. I said, you're doing something I've never seen done in Hollywood. It should be done. That is so awesome. I think, like I just gushed over him and so forth. So the next scene I'm shooting with him, he's like, Andy, come here. I want you to do this. That led to me being bumped up 3 pay grades. I got to do a stunt. I got to do a whole bunch of stuff. They bumped my pay up 3. I'm on camera a whole lot more. And they were about to give me lines. And then they were like, it's 3 a.m. We've already called the producer about you 3 times to bump your pay grade. If we give you lines, we have to then have you sign, an extra contract. You do this. So just emote it. so I finally, in the stunt that I did, I have a knife up to this character's throat. They're tied in on both of us. I'm supposed to just be like grabbing him, putting a knife to his throat. And so I did that, and the camera's dollying in on me, and I go, "Yeah!" And I showed my fangs, and I kind of twitched my head, which the monsters did on Grimm. They kind of did these head twitches, and I twitched my head and showed my fangs and growled. That was the shot, of course, they used. But then they did a promo for the first episode, and I'm right there in the photo that they sent out to the press. There's Andy, front and center. And so I was like, fuck yes. So I sent out all this, all social media. I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm in a 2-part Grimm. The first part's tonight. Tune in to see me. Look, here's this photo that they sent out. The episode comes on. I'm like, okay, where's the scene? Where's the scene? Oh, there's my foot. Fuck. I'm not in the, they cut the scene.
Oh, shit.
Like, my foot is in the scene. They cut the majority of the scene out. My foot's in there, And I was so embarrassed that I was like, okay, I'm not even going to PR the second episode because, like, what if they cut all that stuff out? But I didn't think they were going to, because they had actually brought me in to film extra stuff. They didn't have anybody. They brought me in special to film some extra stuff. And so I was like, I don't think they're going to cut me, but I don't want to risk embarrassing myself again that, I'm going to tell everybody, watch me on Grimm, and then it doesn't happen. So, I'm on the West Coast. It airs on the East Coast in New York. And I get a call 3 minutes into the show from a friend in New York, and he goes, Andy, why didn't you talk about this? They fucking open on your face. And sure enough, the episode airs, and they literally open with a close-up of my face as I turn my face, and then they cut to another scene. And I was like, okay, yeah. And then I'm all over that episode. I'm all through it. You get to see my werewolf fangs. And then they said, okay, unless we bring your character back, we can't use you anymore on a future season because I'm captured and imprisoned at the end of the episode. But they filmed this coda right at the last minute. They filmed this coda where the police chief says, as long as they're behind bars, we're safe, or something like that. And then they filmed a new scene where they cut to our leader who's like plotting in prison. And so they were like, okay, everybody prepare yourself because we may be bringing you all back next season. And I was like, Secret Werewolf wins.
That is fantastic.
Then the show got canceled.
The first episode that you were in, was that episode 2 of season 1?
Yeah, that's
right.
literally the first one. You only see me kind of like in 1 or 2 scenes. I'm going by
because I honestly missed you in that, but caught you in all the others.
Yeah. It's the mustache is the beard is not always this long, but the mustache is always huge. So as long as you look for an enormous mustache, that's pretty much always me.
Yeah. All right. Well, that pretty much ends the show. We just passed the 2-hour mark.
Can I plug one more thing?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So speaking of big mustaches, comic shows, and so forth, the new season of Criminal is about to debut sometime soon, which is based on Ed Brubaker's comic book. Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and they filmed it here in Portland, and I'm in that. I play a boxing coach, and I'm in the background. There's a scene where they're going to kill a guy in a boxing gym, and I'm in the background there. I have no idea how much I'm in it, but I'm there, and the camera was on me, so who knows? But it's the first comic book show I've been in. Grimm was closed, and had Innovation been around, we would have gotten that freaking Grimm license.
Well, yeah, it's like I still think all the stuff Dynamite has been doing, you should be writing a lot of that stuff, including Grimm.
Thank you. I agree.
All right. So let's wrap here. Thank you so much, Andy, for taking 2 hours plus to be with us. I learned some wonderful stuff, and it is always a treat to talk to you.
Thank you, Dave. I adore you. I adore your wife. I I it's so important that people know uh, that there are good people in the comic world, and you are absolutely one of them. I would work with you. I will work with you in a heartbeat. And anybody who's looking for creators, go to Glasshouse Graphics because Dave will treat you right. I got to say that. Chris, you haven't said much. Nice to meet you, but I got to give all my love to Dave.
That's fine.
Thank you so
Dave
much,
is a
Andy.
fantastic person. So
All right, let's wrap here. See everybody next Saturday. Thank you.
Live
all
long
right,
and prosper.
bye everybody. Have a good